nangyayari yun?
That is correct. Kasi partner niya in many of his advocacies ang IBP. So in particular sa judicial reform, umiikot siya sa bansa at ina-explain yung advocacy niya na padaliin ang procedure lalo na dun sa MTC level. So yes, mapapatunayan na totoo lahat yun.
Professor Carl, mukhang kitang-kita yung kanyang passion for the poor. Bilang kayo advocate din for social transformation, is that a good sign na merong kandidato na talagang mangiyak-ngiyak pa?
Sobrang it's a good sign po, nakakatuwa po na talagang meron palang, ang dami palang pwedeng gawin to reform the justice system. Para sa akin po, nakakapanibago po ito lahat ito. Mga very specific, very concrete ways to change the system. At nakakatuwa na siya mismo, ginagawa niya na, at lumalabas siya sa Supreme Court dito sa FAURA, pumupunta talaga sa kung saan kailangan ng pagbabago.
Oo. How do you think will his association with the former Chief Justice, Attorney Trixie, affect yung solid credential na pinakita niya?
Sa tingin naman, hindi dapat, no? Kasi in the first place, contentious pa yung issue about the impeachment of the former Chief Justice. Although accepted ang kanyang pagtanggal sa posisyon na inookupahan niya at the time. So, para sa atin, I think the credentials really ought to speak for themselves. Dahil ang ibang mga kandidato bring with themselves nothing more than their own passion. At least si Justice Abad, meron siyang solid na nagawa na.
Meron ng kaganapan, balik tayo, tingnan natin ang kaganapan uli sa, ayan na po yung ating susunod na kandidato. Marahil ito ay si Attorney Morales.
Advisory and Consultative Council, wherein the three heads of government sit down to thresh out problems besetting the country. And that is one of the functions of the Chief Justice. And I think he will have to make adjustment so that he will be able to fulfill those two pronged functions.
Thank you, Attorney Morales. Now let's tackle the adjudicatory function. Now, having worked in the private sector, practically all of your legal career, throughout your legal career, how will you overcome the fact that you perhaps may have to undergo some kind of orientation as how decisions are prepared in the Supreme Court? Well,
the duties that I do in the private sector as the managing partner of CISIP Salazar Hernandez and Gatmaitan are almost similar to what a Chief Justice does. For the past 37 years, I have been writing opinions to clients, which is actually similar to decisions being written by the justices of the Supreme Court. Facts are presented to me by clients, and I render an opinion based on the facts and the applicable law. Also, as I mentioned already, the Chief Justice is the administrator of the entire judiciary, and I, as the managing partner, administers the different departments of my firm, and I interact with other colleagues. We are a member of 7 international networks, and I interact with them. So the functions of the Chief Justice are not really strange to me.
Which brings me to the next aspect of the question, which is on administration. And you mentioned that from what you know, 70% of the work that is to be done by the Chief Justice involves administration, particularly the administration of justice. What in your recent past will show that you have the skills required to manage and to administer justice?
In terms of management, I have been the president of the Inter-Pacific Bar Association, which is an association of more than 2,000 lawyers coming from more than 70 jurisdictions. And I was able to competently interact with the members. I presided over meetings of the General Assembly. And I think those are substantially similar to what the Chief Justice will be doing.
So what was something that you feel that was a major accomplishment insofar as, getting things done in the organization, which you feel is necessary for someone who has to manage courts nationwide?
Well, we held an international conference in Manila and it was organized by myself as the chair of the host committee. And the theme of the conference was about the changing face of legal practice and how the lawyers could help in the promotion of social justice and generally cope with the changing face of the legal profession.
As a candidate for the position of Chief Justice, what is your vision for the courts? What do you want to accomplish in the judicial system within the next 5 years if appointed Chief Justice?
I understand that there is an action program for judicial reform in place, and that has been declared by the World Bank as the model for the region. During my watch as Chief Justice, I would like the entire action reform to be implemented, particularly in the matter of decongesting the dockets of the court and providing upward salary adjustments to judges so that the independence of the judiciary will be further enhanced.
I also noticed that you are the managing partner of CCIP Salazar Hernandez and Gatmaitan law firm, and how long have you had this? Have you held this position?
About over 2 years now.
And as managing partner, do you still actually litigate cases? Do you go to court?
I don't go to trial, but as managing partner, I am involved in litigation in the sense that I help conceptualize and strategize cases. My role as a litigator is akin to the role of a solicitor in the United Kingdom. The solicitor helps in strategizing the cases, helps in writing pleadings, but it is the barrister that appears before the court. And both the solicitors and the barristers are intimately involved in the litigation. My function is akin to that of a solicitor.
What to you is the most serious problem that is plaguing the judicial system today?
It is the inability of the courts to render judgment to dispose of cases speedily.
And what do you think is the cause of that delay?
It is because the courts are undermanned. If you have a vineyard in which there are a lot of grapes to be harvested and there are only a few workers, the logical step is to hire more workers. But in the judiciary, about 25% of vacancies has not been filled up. So the judiciary is undermanned. And that's why I was proposing the upward adjustment of the salary scales of the judges so that we can attract more applicants from a wider range of applicants. Yeah.
On a practical sense, when was the last time that you visited a court?
It was about a few years ago.
A few years ago. And which court is this?
Regional trial court.
Is it here in Metro Manila?
Yes, it is in Manila.
Okay, so you have not had the occasion to visit a court in the provinces?
No, but no.
How about, have you had any conversation with perhaps a judge or a court personnel to really find out, from their perspective, what seems to be the problem causing the delay?
Yes. And I've also been in discussion with my partners who are in the litigation department of my firm.
Okay. So what was your basis for coming up with these proposals, considering that it has been some time since you've actually been in the courts?
It is precisely my discussions with my partners in the litigation department. We have a very big litigation department in CCIP Salazar Hernandez and Gatmaitan.
I went through the list that you presented in your personal data sheet of the seminars that you've attended, also in the symposia that you have participated in. And except for two, which you participated in 1982, which is on the rulemaking of administrative agencies, and as a participant and a speaker for the opportunities and challenges of managing a law firm in just last April. The rest were all on banking, commerce, and taxation. How will you remedy the fact that perhaps with respect to other aspects of the administration of justice when it comes to criminal cases and to civil cases, what have you done to augment perhaps the lack of focus on these aspects of administration in your career?
Well, to be a trial lawyer is not necessarily a guarantee that you'll make a good justice. In fact, there are lawyers from our firm who became justices of the Supreme Court. And I could cite Justice Florentino Pipi Luciano, who was a corporate lawyer in my mold, and he became a good justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Sereno was a former associate of our firm, and she was not a trial lawyer. The acting Chief Justice was a corporate lawyer before he became a justice of the Supreme Court.
Well, I guess perhaps the challenge is becoming the next Chief Justice because there is so much that is expected of him, and therefore, if he does not have the skills required for the work, then perhaps we may still face the same problems plaguing our courts today. Now,
I have already mentioned, ma'am, that what I do in CSIP Salazar is similar to what the Chief Justice does. And I've reached the point in my career that I am willing, ready, and able to do full-time public service.
Thank you. You are in your 60s.
I'm 61
Yes.
years old.
Did it ever occur to you in the past to render public service?
Yes, in fact, every Saturday I teach at the College of Law of the UP.
Could you tell us what subjects you teach?
It's banking and finance, and then I taught for some time corporation law, legal ethics.
There is a constant clamor for our justice system to address the needs of the underprivileged. What reforms would you propose in order to meet this demand?
I am in favor of making the courts more accessible to litigants. I think that the filing fees are quite very high, and I'm in favor of reducing the filing fees. But in order to recoup losses possible from the reduction of legal fees, I would work for the increase in the share of the judiciary in the national budget. I understand that it's only 1%, and I'm surprised why that is too low. For a third branch of the government to be given only 1% of the national budget is, I think, is scandalous.
In the choice of perhaps your legal team in the Office of the Chief Justice, what would be the qualities that you would look for in law clerks?
I would nurture and sustain integrity and excellence. I think those two qualities would serve our justice system very well. And by the way, those are the values, the core values. They are the cornerstone of CSIP Salazar, Hernandez, and Gadmaitan.
My final question, Attorney Morales.
Yes, ma'am.
Why do you want to become the Chief Justice?
I'm not saying that the incumbent justices of the Supreme Court are not competent. However, we have reached a point in our history that an outsider should be given the opportunity to provide fresh and impartial approach to the judicial process. We have seen that the impeachment proceedings have eroded the dignity and credibility of the Supreme Court. It is time to restore that credibility, and the first step that should be taken by the President is to appoint an outsider as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I bring with me 37 years of legal practice from the largest and the leading law firm in the Philippines. I also bring the perspective of an academic, having taught at the College of Law for almost 15 years. And I also bring along with me the managerial skills that I have experience as managing partner of CC Salazar and as former president of the Inter-Pacific Bar Association.
Thank you, Attorney Morales. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Mejia.
Thank you, Justice Peralta. Good morning po,
Good morning.
Attorney Morales. I could see from your personal data sheet that you've been exposed to practice of law in foreign jurisdictions. No? What best practices have you learned or observed that you think you could introduce to our judicial system?
It is the ability to respond to clients in 24 hours. The promptitude with which one should take care of legal matters, which is not strictly observed in our court system.
We've been hearing about judicial reforms since we started yesterday. What to you is the real objective of judicial reforms?
I think the real objective is to provide justice, speedy justice to the people.
I also saw from your trainings and your area of expertise that you lecture and you do taxation work.
Partly, yes.
Maybe I'll take advantage of this opportunity to ask you, what is your assessment of our taxation system? We learned from law school that one of the characteristics of an ideal taxation system is that there must be theoretical justice. Is our present system in keeping with that yardstick?
I think that we should adopt the standard deduction so that you limit the discretion of the examiners when they examine or make assessment of taxpayers.
So you're suggesting that we revert, for example, to the system of gross income taxation?
Yes, something like that.
As my final question po, should you be appointed as Chief Justice, can you give us an idea of your work ethic as such Chief Justice?
I do work very diligently for the past 37 years. It is precisely the excellence which is a cornerstone in our law firm that over the 37 years of legal practice has propelled me to what I am now in my law firm. It's diligence, promptitude, and reasoned legal opinions.
Thank you, Attorney Morales. Thank you, Justice Peralta. That will be all. Good luck po.
Justice Lagman, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Attorney Morales, good morning.
Good morning.
You stated earlier that if you will be the next Chief Justice, you will provide real justice to our people. Can you please explain what you mean by real justice?
Well, it is whenever there is a case pending, it is the duty of a judge to dispose of it speedily.
Yes.
As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
That way, people would have, redress of grievances. And I think speedy disposition of cases is a must so that the people's confidence in the justice system will be restored.
So, and if you will be the next Chief Justice, how are you going to do that? To speed up the disposition of cases or to declog the dockets of the courts nationwide?
Well, first of all, I would see to it that the vacancies would be filled up.
Yes.
Secondly, I think that we have to strengthen the research staff. We should employ more researchers, and if possible, we employ interns.
Interns.
Yes, so that there'll be additional bodies that will do research, speed up the work. And I think we should encourage shorter decisions. For instance, if the Supreme Court thinks that the decision which is under appeal from the Court of Appeals is sound, then the Supreme Court's decision should merely say that we adopt by reference the facts and the findings of law of the Court of Appeals, and then, you know, a one-pager decision would be, one-page decision would be all right, and in compliance substantially with the Constitution of the Philippines.
Okay. Attorney Morales, considering your experience, there's no doubt that you possess the management skills required in running the judiciary. However, to effectively discharge your function as the Chief Executive Officer of the judiciary and lead the court, you must do it with moral ascendancy. And you can only have moral ascendancy if you have the respect, the trust, and confidence of all the associate justices working with you. Attorney Morales, can you tell us how you intend to get the respect, the trust, and confidence of the incumbent justices, most of whom are older than you, not only in age, but in terms of length of service in the judiciary?
I am a consensus builder.
Yes.
I would like to reach out with my colleagues at the Supreme Court and appeal to their sense of patriotism, seek their cooperation in the interest of country and people. And with respect to seniority, I think that seniority is not always observed in the Supreme Court,
Yes.
as borne out by the fact that two younger justices are candidates for the position. And also, the acting chief has come up with a declaration in an interview that he would respect the decision of the President of the Philippines, whether the appointee would be an insider or outsider.
So, during the impeachment trial of the former Chief Justice, the moral fitness of a candidate for that position was raised. Now, can you tell us your perception of moral fitness as a criteria in selecting the next Chief Justice?
Moral fitness is number one in my list. Honesty is the best policy. You know? Without integrity, on the part of the Chief Justice, people would not repose trust and confidence in the court system.
Okay, let's go to another point. It is given that the two political branches of government, namely the executive and the legislative, have the primary responsibility of promoting the economic well-being of the country. In one of his lectures, a former Chief Justice stated that the judiciary has a similar duty to nurture prosperity and alleviate poverty in our country. Do you agree, Attorney Morales?
To some extent, although on matters dealing with the economics,
Yes.
I would probably exhibit judicial restraint.
Okay. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that?
If a case is brought before the Supreme Court and it concerns economic policies, then I would probably exhibit judicial restraint in that I would uphold and sustain the policies promulgated by the executive or the legislative branch.
Okay, I'm sure you're aware of that provision in the new constitution that it is not only the power but the duty of the court to strike down acts of any branch or instrumentality of government committed in grave abuse of discretion.
Yes, ma'am.
So, do you want to comment on that in relation to your previous answer?
Well, that actually expanded judicial review,
Yes.
and that eroded somewhat the political question doctrine, and that answers the criticism founded on the doctrine of counter-majoritarian, because whenever the Supreme Court strikes down as unlawful or unconstitutional a legislative or executive act, the Supreme Court is said to be counter-majoritarian, because those acts are acts of the political branches of government that have been elected by the majority of the people. But again, that loses sight of the fact that the Supreme Court is granted by the people under the Constitution to determine whether there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excessive jurisdiction by any instrumentality of government.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you will be fortunate to be nominated and appointed as the next Chief Justice of our country, will you kindly tell us your top 3 priorities upon assumption of office?
I'm going to fill up the vacancies because judiciary is undermanned. Second, I would work for the upward adjustment of salaries to prevent or to stem the brain drain in the judiciary, because we cannot attract the bright people because the salaries in the private sector are very high compared to that in the judiciary. Then I would work for the increase in the budgetary allocation of the judiciary.
Okay, Attorney Morales, this will be my last question in connection with your answer. We all know that a Chief Justice is both a jurist and the Chief Executive Officer of the judiciary. As a jurist, a Chief Justice is expected not only to be actually independent, but must be perceived as independent at all times. However, as a CEO, he has to deal with officials from the other 2 branches of government and maintain a harmonious relationship with these people. Now, can you tell us, Attorney Morales, how you can balance these 2 seemingly conflicting functions? How can you preserve your independence and at the same time maintain a cordial relationship with the officials of the other 2 branches of government?
The 2 justices are not mutually inconsistent. Independence, a judge is independent if he's able to decide the case purely on the basis of the merits,
Yes.
and swayed by any partisan interests, not influenced by family, social, or other relationship. That is independence as defined in the Code of Judicial Conduct.
Then,
Interacting with the executive or legislative officials does not necessarily detract from the independence of the Chief Justice. In fact, that is supposed to be encouraged, because the judiciary is not supposed to be staying in the ivory tower.
so your idea is of a Chief Justice is not to stay in the ivory tower all the time, but he has to go out.
Yes, ma'am. Precisely, the Judicial, Executive, Legislative, Advisory, Consultative Council was created
GLAC.
precisely for that purpose, for the interaction between and among the heads of the different branches of government.
So you believe in the benefits derived from activating this GLAC?
Absolutely.
Okay. On that note, Mr. Chair, I have no more question for Attorney Morales. Thank you, Attorney Morales.
Justice Hermosissima.
Good morning, Attorney Morales.
Good morning.
Any relation to the Ombudsman?
No relation.
No, no relation at all. I was hoping you'd say yes. Well, the tremendous inherent power in the hands of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court require that those appointed to the position should possess the highest degree of competence, integrity, and judicial prudence. Because the administration of justice is a sacred task, entrusted only to individuals with the highest degree of competence. A judicial position is a position of honor and is offered only to those who are best qualified. You have never been a judge before, nor were you a justice of the appellate courts. How do you assess yourself in connection with these ideals?
Well, I have the requisite competence, integrity, probity, and independence. As I said earlier, the cornerstones of the practice in my firm is integrity and excellence, and we have been doing that since the time the CCP law was founded in 1945. We are an apolitical firm, and we do not subscribe to political connections in the pursuit of our legal profession. And I'll be bringing with me no baggages with me, no strings attached when I become, if ever, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Well, your senior partner, Justice Feliciano, was together with me in the Supreme Court. And I can say without any opposition that he is the paragon of a good justice. And so if you are a member of his firm, then the possibility is that you are also the same mold.
He is precisely my model, Mr. Justice.
What is your judicial philosophy? If you become a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?
Mr. Justice, a judge's judicial philosophy or decision-making process is largely shaped by the Code of Judicial Conduct. Canon 3 of the Code states that a judge must determine the facts and apply the applicable law to the set of facts. So if there are clear-cut legal norms applicable, I would simply apply the legal norms to the set of facts. However, there are situations where there are no clear-cut legal provisions or norms that are applicable. But I have to decide the case because the instruction in Article 9 of the Civil Code is that no judge shall decline to render judgment because of the silence, obscurity, or insufficiency of the laws. But in those cases, I have to navigate uncharted waters using my experience as a guide and guided by my beliefs. So there's a spectrum, one end of which is judicial activism and the other is judicial restraint. I will be inclined to be an activist if a person is unreasonably deprived of his life or liberty or even property, or if there has been a grave abuse of discretion on the part of a particular branch of government. So for instance, if I may illustrate, if I were a justice of the Supreme Court at the time the case of Allied Banking Corporation versus Court of Appeals was decided, I would have dissented because in that case the majority expanded the coverage of the trustees law in violation of the fundamental tenet that penal laws must be strictly construed in favor of the accused and its scope should not be expanded by implication. On the other hand, if I were a part of the Supreme Court at the time the case of Salvacion versus Central Bank of the Philippines was decided, I would have sided with the majority because there the Supreme Court prevented a foreign national who had raped a 12-year-old Filipina from using as a defense the provision in the Foreign Currency Deposit Act prohibiting the garnishment of his deposit. If the Supreme Court did not allow the garnishment of the deposit of that foreign national, justice would have been compounded. Justice would not have been served to that rape victim. But then to summarize, if
I'll give you an example.
Oh, all right.
When you enter the portals of the Supreme Court of the United States, you will see emblazoned the following words: equality under law. It's a revelation of the court's judicial philosophy. Here in the Philippines, the Supreme Court of the Philippines, what do you have? Batas, Bayan. That's their short term. Now, the integrated bar of the Philippines has this: no master but law, no guide but conscience, no aim but justice. In your case, how do you shorten your judicial philosophy?
I think those mottos are just a short restatement of the concept of independence, that the judge must dispose of a case purely on the basis of merits in accordance with justice and law, without being influenced by any extraneous factor.
Do you abide by the judicial philosophy of the integrated bar of the Philippines? No master but law, no guide but conscience, no aim but justice.
Yes, justice, yeah.
Why? What is your concept of justice?
Justice is being able to provide speedy disposition of cases, because justice delayed is justice denied.
So, on what basis do magistrates base their opinions, their decisions? On the basis of law.
In the basis of law, yes.
So, if the law does not coincide with your conscience, will you abide by the law?
I think, unless amended, the applicable legal norms should be applied, Mr. Justice.
If the law does not coincide with your concept of justice, will you abide by the law?
It depends on the factual circumstances at the time. I am between judicial activism and judicial restraint.
What subject in law is your forte, Attorney Morales?
When I was a law student, I excelled in all subjects, Mr. Justice.
Yes, you made it with the grade of, you made the bar in the grade of 87.79. Was that?
I was number 4 in the bar exams.
That was number 4.
Yes.
So what was your highest grade in the bar?
It was political law, I got 97, criminal law 96.
You will realize, but in your practice now, you also delve in corporation law.
Yes.
Well, that's in your law office. You accept all kinds of cases.
We are a one-stop firm. We cater to all the needs of our clientele.
That's good because the Supreme Court is a court of general jurisdiction, and so you have to be an expert in all kinds of law. Although that is impossible, really.
Yes, I'm actually a specialist and a generalist at the same time.
So, deep inside you, you believe that you are deserving of appointment to the as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
On that note, thank you very much.
Congressman Tupas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good noon, Attorney Morales.
Good noon.
Yeah. You're the managing partner of CCIP Salazar.
Yes,
Law
sir.
Firm.
Yeah.
Okay. And it seems that at least may sa akin, no, sa pananaw ko, at least parang you have this lucrative practice, di ba?
Yes.
As dun sa one of the leading major law firms. Ano po yung naisip nyo? Bakit gusto nyo pang pumunta sa gobyerno at sa third branch, yung one of the 3 branches of government na dito mahirap po sa gobyerno, di ba? May SALN po dito, may filing ng SALN, may waiver pa. No? So gusto ko lang malaman yung dahilan, yung main reason bakit po gusto nyo, let's say, give up itong practice nyo tapos punta kayo dito sa gobyerno bilang aplikante sa posisyon ng Chief Justice?
I have reached a point in my career that I'm already willing, ready, and able to render full-time public service. I think I have more than sufficient savings, and I want to give back something to my country.
Before this, nanilbihan ba kayo sa gobyerno?
Nagturo po ako ng
Turo?
almost 15 years sa UP.
Yung law firm, di ba? Like tayo, ako, nag-practice rin ako sa, naging associate rin ako sa isang law firm. At mukhang iba ata yung pag-manage ng law firm kaysa pag-manage the entire judiciary. 'Di ba na buong sistema. So paano nyo yung skills nyo, let's say, as a managing partner now, makakatulong ba yun? Sapat ba yun? Para maging Chief Justice ng Korte Suprema?
Definitely, sir. If I become a Chief Justice, I intend to visit the different salas in the different provinces, see what their needs are, and see whether we can provide a separate buildings for us courthouses in those provinces, because it doesn't appear good that courtrooms are inside the city hall. They should be separated from the city hall.
Kanina, meron kayong statement kanina, no? Sinabi nyo na the impeachment has eroded the integrity of the Supreme Court and the judiciary. Diba? So, parang I was taken aback because ang opening statement ko noon is yung impeachment, nangyari yon to bring back the dignity, integrity, and honor to the Supreme Court and the institution. So, pwede pa-explain lang nun. Bakit? Yung process ba, in-erode niya yung integrity and credibility?
Yeah, you're
ano
right.
ibig niyo sabihin nun?
You're right in the sense that it has restored credibility because the constitutional process had been served. We were able to remove a Chief Justice that was perceived to be guilty of some offenses. But what I am driving at, because I was asked a question of whether or not why would be something like, why would an outsider be the Chief Justice? So I answered in that context.
So personally, okay sa inyo yung nangyari?
Of course.
Okay,
Yes.
personally.
Personally, yes.
Meron din dito katanungan lang from the Twitter nung JBC siguro. Tanong natin yung just few questions. Ano raw yung comment nyo dito sa practice na yung mga law firms through retired justices sumusulat sa Korte Suprema? What's your comment on that?
Well, I would not countenance that practice.
Okay, so ayaw nyo yun? Ayaw nyo?
Ayaw ko.
Meron ditong katanungan rin na, are you aware raw or alam nyo na yung law firm ninyo, ito binabasa ko lang po sa Twitter ito, na through sa isang retired justice, sumulat rin po ng personal letter sa Supreme Court. Totoo po yan? May nangyari ba yan? Yung sa law firm, through parang off-counsel?
I had no personal knowledge of that, but I have read that in the papers.
So no personal, pero ayaw nyo yon, hindi nyo ito-tolerate yon?
No.
Okay. Siguro, last question na lang, Mr. Chairman. Yung isang kaibigan ko dito sa media, si Karen Davila, meron tweet dito. Yung mga budget cuts, di ba, lalo na yung last budget nung last year, parang nagkaroon ng controversy yung executive, legislative, at saka yung hudikatura sa mga budget cuts na nangyari. Cut supposedly by the executive proposal. So, sa inyo ba, anong pananaw nyo dito sa pondo ng Korte Suprema?
The share in the budget? Or?
Yes, the share of the budget, budget cuts. Ito yung mga issue na to na parang nagkaroon pa tayo ito ng mga rally or protest sa mga korte all over the country.
To the extent possible, I would resist any budget cut on the judiciary's share of the allocation in the budget.
Resist budget cut or increase?
Well, resist the budget cut and therefore increase it, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Mosgi.
Mr. Chairman, I think all my queries have been sufficiently addressed. I have no further questions for the aspirant.
Thank you.
Okay, now how would you address the problem of dockets of courts, especially the lower courts?
First, I think there should be a strict enforcement of the deadlines. Second, I would increase the staff complement of the different salas so that there will be more bodies to do the research work and assist the judge in disposing the cases speedily.
But that solution might take years to happen because you will have to contend with the rules of the civil service. If you want to increase the personnel of an office in government, the Supreme Court just increased the number of employees. You will have to contend with the rules of the civil service.
Then can we not hire?
You will have to go to Congress for additional budget.
Then
you will have to justify to the executive, to the Department of Justice, Department of Budget, that you need this amount.
Then I would liaise with the executive and the legislative branches in order to precisely to implement that proposal.
Anyway, that's a long-term solution. Yes. I am talking about short-term solutions in order to reduce the backlog of the cases in the lower courts.
And fill up the vacancies.
Mm-hmm.
And probably hire interns.
Mm-hmm. Hire?
If we could not immediately hire permanent clerks or researchers. But the thing is, we must fill up the vacancies because it's intolerable that the vacancies is at 25%.
What is your position in the adoption of rules to the effect that instead of an oral testimony of witnesses, the witnesses' testimony shall be in affidavit form, which we sometimes call judicial affidavits. Are you in favor of the use of judicial affidavits?
I am in favor of that use, provided that there's an ability to cross-examine the
Of course, the other party will have to cross-examine. But there are some resistance, or there are resistances rather, because if you do that, especially in criminal cases, judges will not be able to determine the demeanor of the witness. And one way of determining the demeanor of a witness is the credibility of the witness is the demeanor of the witness when he takes the witness stand.
I think that the determination of the demeanor of the witness might come during the cross-examination.
Well, but if you allow a judicial affidavit, you can just imagine that if the judicial affidavit is prepared by the counsel, of course it will be the best judicial affidavit. It will be the best affidavit because practically the witness is already taught what to say. Unlike when the testimony of the witness is made orally, and I am referring to the direct examination, where the case is developed through the questions and answers. And you can also, it's also needed, you can determine the demeanor of the witness, therefore, not only on cross-examination, but likewise on direct examination.
Yes, you are articulating the possible drawback of the proposal.
So that's why, it was a follow-up question because according to you, the demeanor of the witness may be determined through the cross-examination. But what I'm saying also is that you can also determine the demeanor of the witness on direct examination.
Of course.
So what is your position now? You are in favor of judicial affidavit?
Well, I thought that you were proposing it as a means to accelerate cases.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking if you're in favor of a judicial affidavit instead of a direct examination in order to expedite cases.
I'm inclined to favor to some extent. Yeah.
What about amendment of the rules of court? Are you proposing the amendment of the rules of court in order to expedite cases? Because I think if I heard you right, you were saying that he will be strict on the periods within which to terminate a case. Did I get you right?
Yes.
Yeah. But we have already periods under the rules.
It's a matter of implementing it strictly.
You want that it be strictly implemented?
Yeah.
No. Aside from the strict implementation of the periods provided for by the rules and other laws, what else do you suggest?
It's probably good to remove technical requirements
Technical, like what?
Like, for instance, if there are defects in the verification or in the
Oh, you're referring to initiatory pleadings, probably complaints.
well, then if there's a defect in the verification or similar things, that judges should not be strict.
But if you know, just for your information, in the data submitted presented by Dean Bautista yesterday, the disposal rating of the Supreme Court is high. I think it's something like 60%. The disposal rating of the Court of Appeals, likewise, is possible, no? But the disposal rating of the Sandigan Bayan, the lower courts, is low. Probably the reason is that the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court are not trier of facts. In other words, they are not trial courts.
All right.
We resolve cases based on the pleadings, no? Also in the Court of Appeals, they resolve cases based on the pleadings. But in the lower courts, before they could decide cases, they will have to hear the cases.
Yes.
Also in the Sandigan Bayan, because in Sandigan Bayan it's a unique court. It is an appellate court because the cases that are decided by the lower courts, insofar as commission of crimes by public official, go to the Sandigan Bayan on appeal.
Mm-hmm.
But they have also original jurisdiction. They hear cases. And the backlog of cases, I think, is attributable to the long process of presentation of evidence, which means trial. Do you agree, Tony? Do you agree on that? In your practice of law, do you agree that there is really delay in the cases before trial courts? Do you agree?
That's right.
So aside from judicial affidavits and aside from strict adherence to the periods within which to resolve cases, what proposal?
Well, continuous trials.
Continuous trial. We have also that in the rules. Under the speedy trial, continuous trial.
But not strictly implemented.
What about the pretrial rule? Is the pretrial rule an effective measure of expediting the termination of cases?
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. As a practitioner, have you appeared before judges, and have you observed them strictly following the provisions of the rules on pretrial?
Not in the recent past.
Oh. But even when you were a new lawyer, there was already a rule on pretrial.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, there is also a question from the Twitter. Oh, before I go to that, this comes from the Twitter. But because of that question, I'm reminded of that case, the one that you mentioned about Salvacion versus Central Bank.
All right.
That is a decision regarding the interpretation of the Foreign Currency Development, Deposit Act.
Yes.
Whether or not dollar deposit can be opened, considering the fact that there is an absolute confidentiality, and it can only be opened through the consent of the depositor.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. But in Salvacion, according to you, the court required the opening of the foreign deposit.
It's the garnishment.
The garnishment,
Yes.
yeah. It allowed the garnishment.
Yes.
Because of that civil liability awarded by the court in a rape case.
Yes.
Because you could not probably anymore, because there was no way to enforce the damages awarded by the court, if not through this deposit. Okay.
Yes.
But you agree with me that that case is merely pro hac vice?
Yes, it's pro hac vice.
Only for that case?
Only for that.
Yeah. Only for that case?
That's right.
Not in other cases, no?
Not in other cases.
Now, there is another question here, no? Should retired Supreme Court justices accept directorships in corporations who are involved in cases they previously decided?
I would not do that personally. Yeah.
What do you mean you do not do that?
I would refrain from accepting directorship after my retirement.
Yeah, because under the law, I remember under 6713, you're not supposed to accept positions positions in institutions where those institutions had cases before the court within a period of 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the provision.
That's right. But even after 1 year,
under Republic Act 6713, it is indeed prohibited within the 1 year period. Okay. Beyond that 1 year period, if you were now retired as a justice, would you accept?
I would not accept.
Definitely.
Definitely, I would just go to teaching.
You will
go back to teaching.
You will be content with a pension, probably of a small amount.
Yes, but I have more than savings from my law practice, so money is not an issue.
So because you already earn a lot so you already earn a lot in the practice of law, there is no need to go back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Not even your law office, you will not go back as an off counsel?
No.
No more?
No more.
Okay. Now, my last question is, because of your background, Attorney Morales, you've been representing probably big businesses, no, paying high fees, and private individuals paying high fees, no. In other words, your practice is quite lucrative, no.
Yes, sir.
You're lucrative. And you now become the Chief Justice. Now, I'm just wondering, how would you lead and deal with 14, because you're coming from the outside, 14 experienced justices. Because if I use the word learned, my question might be biased because I'm included, no? So let's assume that experienced 14 justices, and you're coming from the outside.
I would, as I said earlier, I would approach each and every justice and appeal to their sense of patriotism, appeal to them to extend their cooperation to me in the interest of country and the judicial system.
Okay, last question. What is your edge over incumbent justices?
I bring fresh and impartial approach to the judicial process.
So those incumbent justices are no longer fresh.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. On that note, I'm through. Thank you, Attorney Morales.
Isa po sa pinakamalaking law firm ng ating bansa. Inaantabayanan po natin ang pagtawag kay Professor Dean Raul Pangalangan ng University of the Philippines College of Law. Ang siya pong maging pangatlong interviewee sa umagang ito. We notice a malaking pagkakaiba dun sa unang in-interview sa araw na ito, who is an incumbent Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Associate Justice, and a corporate lawyer in the person of Attorney Rafael Morales. Gusto ko yung tanungin kay Attorney Trixie, ano naman ang naging impression niya. Although, mamaya siguro Attorney Trixie, dahil nakaupo na po sa kanyang upuan si Dean Pangalangan, at ito na po yung interview kay Dean, the last interviewee for this morning, Dean Pangalangan.
Members of the Council, good afternoon, Dean Raul Pangalangan.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
My former professor at the UP College of Law. Yes, Dean, first of all, you are 53 years old now. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. quite young dun sa standard ng mga aplikante, di ba?
Opo, tama po.
And if appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you will serve 17 years.
That is correct,
Diba?
Your Honor.
Kanina, when we were interviewing yung first na interview dun sa incumbent justice, si Justice Abad. Parang very, very clear rin yung stand niya dito eh. At least sa akin. Sinabi niyang, dapa na nga eh. Diba sinabi niya, dapa na ang Korte Suprema after impeachment, tapos lalagyan pa ng outsider, lalong dapa, di ba? Dadagdagan pa. Ganun natin sinabi. So meaning yung at least yung sa isa sa mga insiders or incumbent na siyempre prefer nila yung insider, no? For many reasons probably. And probably yung isa sa reason doon yung age, isa doon yung experience. So paano mo pupunuan ito, Dean, if ever na ikaw yung ma-appoint or ma-nominate namin muna at ma-appoint? How would you address yung problems na to na outsider, ito experience yung mga kasama mo doon, matatapakan mo, or hindi naman masasapawan mo yung iba, hindi na magiging Chief Justice. Diba? So how would you address these problems?
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor, for the question. First of all, hindi ho ako bago sa sitwasyon na yon. I became dean at the age of 40. My predecessor was then retiring at the age of 65. He belonged to class 58 of the UP College of Law. I was born in 1958. So the gap was rather big. It did not pose any problem to me. My successor also was actually eventually retired in office. So if the question is whether being young comparatively is a disadvantage, it can actually be turned into an advantage. So for instance, I enjoyed wonderfully the support of my most senior colleagues in the faculty. And they helped me throughout my deanship. I had 2 terms as dean of the law school. And that is why, for me, when I look at the issue, for instance, of what people now call a divided court, a court with well-identified camps, that is a situation I have faced before, of presiding over highly articulate, very intelligent, assertive faculty members who have different opinions, and getting them to work together under my leadership and achieving the goals that I have set out for the institution.
Doon naman po sa, di ba yung Article 8, Section 1, yung expanded jurisdiction. Gusto ko lang, very briefly lang, Dean, ano ang pananaw mo doon sa expanded jurisdiction of the Supreme Court vis-a-vis doon sa political question?
Yes. Thank
Just
you.
very briefly lang.
Opo. Your Honor, we must look at that provision in the context of history. Why did we write paragraph 2 to the expanded definition of judicial power? It was based on our experience under martial law, that the activists at that time turned to the courts for sanctuary, for refuge, and invoked the rule of law. And that is why, with the triumph of EDSA I, Corey appointed constitutional commissioners who wrote that entire approach, that entire philosophy into the 87 Constitution. So when we now arrive at this situation of what they call the expanded, expansive exercise of judicial review, of judicial activism, it is not that we are pointing fingers and accusing people. It is that we are seeing the inexorable march of history, which brought us to that moment. But, Your Honor, it is now 25 years since the 1987 Constitution. A quarter of a century since EDSA I, the foundational moment of the post-Marcos constitutional order. That is long enough for us to look at whether this judicial aggrandizement has served the country. And I think the lesson is it has not. And that is why I respectfully submit that I think the time has